Under the fading hues of a late summer sky, Tom Harris rolled his dusty blue pickup truck down Willow Street, the tires humming a low lullaby across the smooth pavement. It was a rare kind of evening, the kind that felt earned. The kind where every drop of exhaustion pooling behind his eyes came with a quiet, satisfied ache. After months of chasing a difficult business deal, it had finally closed. And tucked securely in the back seat was a reward he'd promised himself the moment it died, a new hunting shotgun, still nestled in its box. Not just a weapon, but a symbol, a personal marker, proof that life, despite all its recent chaos, was leveling out again. It hadn't always been like this. The past year had been hell, one hospital room after another, late nights staring at monitors, gripping Emily's pale hand as the color drained from her cheeks week by week. There were moments Tom wasn't sure she'd make it. But now she was laughing again, cooking barefoot in the front yard, humming to old love songs while watering petunias. She wasn't fully herself yet, but close enough for Tom to believe in second chances. They had even started planning a modest fall road trip. Nothing fancy, just them, the open road, and no machines beeping in the background. That fragile peace shattered the second he turned onto their street. Two matte gray SUVs sat wedged against the curb in front of his house, their angles deliberate and obstructive. No plats, no insignia, not even the courtesy flashers utility crews often used. Something about them twisted the air around Tom, turned the warm evening chill into a tight knot between his shoulder blades. His brow furrowed as he spotted two men on his porch, thick-necked, hard-eyed, both dressed in mismatched tactical vests with the words HOA enforcement scrawled across the back in cheap print. It was a lie, a bad one. Their neighborhood didn't have roaming HOA agents. Hell, he'd sat on the board 2 years ago. Nothing like this was ever authorized. Then his heart stopped. Emily stood between them, barefoot on the porch, her wrists bound behind her, her body trembling as one man shoved her roughly against the siding. The second circled like a predator, eyes scanning for threats, but it was clear they thought they were the only wolves in this yard. Tom saw the first man grab a fistful of Emily's hair and yank. In that moment, everything else faded. The hum of the engine, the steady beat of his heart, the very world outside, that single frame, his wife's terrified eyes, her mouth open mid-scream. The porch she loved turned into a stage for assault. He didn't think. He didn't aim. He didn't park. The truck leapt the curb with a violent crunch of grass and dirt. He was out before the engine choked its final growl, boots slamming against the earth as he ripped open the rear door and dragged the box free. The shotgun wasn't a reward anymore. It was a promise, a line in the sand. Tom moved like he'd been training for this moment his entire life, calm, deadly, unshakable. The first man on the porch turned, stunned, just in time to meet the cold steel barrel of the 12-gauge resting on his sternum. Tom said nothing. The man's hands twitched. Behind him, the leaner of the two grabbed Emily's arm and dragged her toward the SUV, trunk flung open like a mouth ready to swallow her whole. Tom pulled the trigger. The blast cracked through the neighborhood like a cannon. Birds scattered. Car alarm screamed from 3 blocks away. The second man dropped, clutching his forearm, blood already soaking through the sleeve. The other turned to run. Tom didn't let him. He swung the shotgun like a club, the wooden stock crashing into the man's shoulder with a sickening thud. Then again, and again. The man crumpled, gasping. Silence. Just the sound of Emily's shallow breaths and Tom's own ragged inhalations. The shotgun trembled in his hands, not from nerves but from restraint. He wanted to end them, both of them, but he didn't. Instead, he demanded answers. Who are you? No reply, just a wheeze, a low moan, the sound of blood dripping onto their porch like rain off a gutter. Emily hadn't moved. She stood near the fence now, her hands clutching the wooden post like it was the only thing holding her upright. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. Just breath. Just survival. The sirens arrived 5 minutes later. Squad cars fanned across the yard. Red and blue lights painted the white picket fences like warnings. Officers spilled out in formation, weapons drawn, voices raised, but Tom didn't flinch. He placed the shotgun on the grass gently, carefully, then raised his hands. "I'm not a threat," he said, voice flat. But they were. He told them everything. From the moment he saw the SUVs to the second he pulled the trigger. They listened, took statements, scanned the fake uniforms, ran serial numbers. Then a black SUV arrived. Out stepped Detective Ramon Martinez, a man with the weariness of 100 open cases on his face. One glance at the downed men, and his expression shifted. "I know that one," he muttered. "Dale Cutler. Wanted in Polk County. 2 counts of impersonating a federal officer. Attempted kidnapping. Real estate extortion tied to fake HOA compliance scams." The second man had tranquilizer darts in his vest, metal cuffs, fake documents with forged county seals, a full playbook for intimidation and coercion. "This wasn't a mistake," Martinez said. "This was organized. This was targeted." The real story unfurled like spilled ink across national headlines. The fake HOA squad wasn't new. They'd hit neighborhoods in Florida, Arizona, Nevada, anywhere with vulnerable homeowners and weak oversight. Their targets were families in transition, the sick, the elderly, military wives. They moved fast, forced compliance with threats, pushed property owners to abandon homes, which were quietly acquired through shell companies for pennies on the dollar. They called it distressed acquisition. Tom called it what it was: predatory theft. His 39-second neighbor's cell phone footage, his statement, and Emily's quiet but detailed testimony cracked open a case 3 states had missed. Within days, federal housing investigators were knocking down doors. Within weeks, warrants were issued across county lines. But for Tom and Emily, justice wasn't headlines. It was quieter. It came in the form of fences with reinforced locks, smart cameras on the porch, a community no longer afraid to ask who was knocking on their door. The trial dragged on. 2 weeks of legal acrobatics. The defense didn't dispute the facts. They couldn't. The video footage was too clear, the evidence too damning. So instead, they leaned into perception, painted Tom as volatile, claimed he acted in haste, called it an unfortunate escalation rather than an attempted abduction. They tried to twist the story until it bent. But the truth didn't bend. It stood on the stand quiet and unshakable. It came through neighbors, nurses, officers, and Emily herself. And it landed like a hammer when Judge Jenkins spoke. "This court finds no basis for criminal liability. Mr. Harris responded to an immediate and unlawful threat to his wife's safety on his property. The force he used was proportionate, precise, and restrained. Case dismissed." Tom didn't cry. He didn't cheer. He just closed his eyes and breathed for the first time in weeks. 2 months passed. Grass grew back where the SUVs had scarred the lawn. Emily watered her flowers again barefoot, just like she used to, her steps slower, more watchful, but still hers. Tom didn't speak to reporters, declined interviews, turned down the podcast deals and documentary pitches. Not because he didn't have something to say, but because it wasn't entertainment. It was their life, their porch, their survival. Every now and then, a neighbor would stop by, sometimes to offer thanks, sometimes just to sit. And always, eventually, Tom would say the same thing. "I'm not a hero. I just came home 30 seconds earlier than they expected." And across the yard, Emily would lift her mug, nodding quietly. A woman who'd found her voice again, because someone came home just in time. That fall, the road trip they once planned in hushed, hopeful tones finally happened, but it looked nothing like the quiet getaway they'd imagined before the nightmare on Willow Street. The route was longer, the path more deliberate. Each stop along the way was a kind of pilgrimage, not to places they dreamed of as vacationers, but to the very heart of what they were fighting for. Tom and Emily took the interstate south first, down into Georgia, where the first recorded incident of fake HOA enforcement had taken place 2 years prior. They met a retired couple there, Jacob and Eileen, who'd been forced to vacate their home of 42 years under the threat of forged legal notices. No one had believed them. No media coverage. No police follow-up. They lost everything and relocated quietly to a rental 2 towns over. When they saw Tom and Emily pull into their gravel driveway, Jacob wept without a word. From Georgia, they moved westward to Texas. Emily insisted on it. There was a single mother outside of Austin Tash and her teenage daughter, Kaylee, who had posted anonymously on a neighborhood message board about two men in vests who tried to gain access to her home using something called urgent compliance verification. She never knew if what she experienced was isolated or part of something bigger. And when the media blew up about the Harris incident, she finally understood what had almost happened. Tom sat on her porch one warm afternoon, his hands wrapped around a chipped ceramic mug, as Killian Lee 14 told Emily she wanted to be a civil rights lawyer now. By the time they reached Colorado, word of their quiet journey had begun to leak. Not by their doing. Tom never once posted anything publicly, but by the ripple of connection. People they visited mentioned their story to others, shared photos, wrote about it in local newsletters. A pastor in Arizona included them in his Sunday sermon about protection. A veterans group in Nevada used Tom's name as a rallying cry to advocate for stronger property rights. It wasn't fame. It was something deeper. Recognition that what they lived through wasn't just trauma, it was the starting point for collective awareness. In Denver, they were invited to a town hall meeting. At first, Tom refused. He didn't want to be the face of anything. He was just a man who loved his wife and showed up 30 seconds earlier than expected. But it was Emily who insisted this time. She spoke first, standing at a podium in a modest community center with mismatched chairs and flickering overhead lights. She told the audience what it felt like to have your humanity stripped away by strangers pretending to have power. Her voice trembled only once, and Tom's hand on her back steadied her. They wore uniforms, she said, but they didn't have badges. They spoke with authority, but they never offered truth. And when I looked at my husband as he stepped out of that truck, I saw something they never saw come in clarity. Not vengeance, not madness, just clarity, the kind that only love sharpens. The room fell so quiet you could hear someone open a soda can in the hallway. Tom spoke after her. Not long, not loud. I don't know much about politics or law, he admitted, but I know what it means to be afraid in your own yard. And I know that no one should have to explain their right to defend the people they love. So if being a little loud now means someone else never has to go through what we did, then so be it. They stayed in Colorado for 4 days. When they returned home, something had changed. Their mailbox was full not of bills or HOA notices, but of handwritten letters. Dozens, then hundreds. Some were from strangers who lived through similar intimidation. Others were from people who just needed to say thank you. A girl in Idaho who'd fought off a fake compliance team using her dad's old Marine instincts. A grandmother in South Carolina who now taught her neighbors how to read legal documents before signing anything. A firefighter in California who'd pushed back on a questionable eviction notice armed with knowledge he never would have had if he hadn't seen their story. One letter came from a state senator's office, then a second. By January, Tom and Emily were invited to sit on an advisory panel at a federal oversight committee hearing in D.C. A bill had been drafted, the Neighborhood Protection and Transparency Act, designed to increase legal penalties for impersonating housing officials and to fund a national registry of verified neighborhood enforcement personnel. It was the first of its kind. Emily read the opening statement into the congressional record. Tom sat beside her, his hands folded quietly. They weren't politicians. They weren't activists. But they were survivors who'd been transformed by necessity into something the world hadn't expected. Truth tellers with scars still fresh enough to be seen, and hearts just strong enough to carry others forward. That spring, they held a barbecue. It wasn't anything big, just a few neighbors, a few veterans, some of the families they'd met along the way. A couple local reporters, not for interviews, but because they'd treated the story with dignity. Emily wore her blue apron. Tom manned the grill. There was laughter again, not the kind that tries to bury pain, but the kind that rises despite it. Midway through the evening, as the sun dipped low and the first lightning bugs appeared, a little boy named Elijah, whose parents had nearly lost their home to a similar scam, tugged on Tom's shirt. "Mr. Harris," he said, his voice shy but proud, My mom says you save your wife like a cowboy in a movie. Tom chuckled, kneeling beside him. No, son, he said softly. Cowboys ride in at the last second. I just happened to be 30 seconds early. Elijah grinned, clearly not knowing the difference. But Tom did. And as he looked across the yard, Emily, smiling beside a flower bed, children racing in circles, neighbors talking without fear, understood the depth of it. 30 seconds had changed everything. It had torn apart a lie and stitched together a movement. One door at a time, one voice at a time, one truth undeniable and unshakable etched into the soul of a quiet street that had once been like any other, but would never be the same again.